The girl was tied to a fence by her cruel in-laws. Until the rancher rode in, "She comes with me." The sun shone hot enough to make the snowy summer dust on the high plains glow white as polished bone, and yet the wind carried a cold bite that sliced through Elena's thin dress as she tried not to shiver against the fence post where her wrists had been bound since dawn. The ropes were coarse, scraping her skin raw, but she held her trembling still, because each movement sent a fresh tremor of pain through her shoulder. The field around her was silent except for distant cattle bells and the occasional caw of a crow, circling above her as if wondering whether she'd be left out long enough to turn into something it could pick at. Her in-laws had tied her here after another argument, one she never stood a chance in. This time they accused her of something she didn't do, something cruel and small, but just enough to give them an excuse. They had spat their words, told her she needed to learn obedience, told her the ranch needed discipline, told her she'd brought misfortune the moment she married their son, and then they left her under the sun and cold wind, claiming they'd return by nightfall maybe, if she had learned to be quiet. She tried to swallow, but her throat had dried to sand, and even the tears she used to let fall freely no longer came. She'd run out of them hours ago. Her mind went numb from a mixture of fear and exhaustion, with flashes of disbelief that this was her life now, married into a family that treated her like livestock they could tie down whenever they needed a target for their bitterness. She had tried to escape once long ago, but was dragged home before she got past the open fields. Since then, she learned silence. Or she tried to. But the silence broke when the rhythmic thud of hooves approached across the hard-packed ground. She jerked her head up, breath catching in her throat. A rider appeared over the ridge, broad-shouldered, sitting straight in the saddle, guiding a big sorrel horse that kicked up small puffs of snowy dust with each step. She didn't know him, she thought at first. But something about the silhouette felt familiar, in a way she couldn't quite grasp. As he drew nearer, she saw the sharp jawline shadowed with stubble, the dark eyes narrowed against the glare, and the tension in his posture that said he didn't come here by chance. The horse stopped in front of her with a soft snort, and the man swung down in one smooth motion. "Elena?" he asked softly, disbelief woven through the stern edge of his voice. She blinked, trying to place him, and then memory flickered. The ranch hand who used to work the neighboring property, years ago, the one who left town, after a dispute with her in-laws, over land boundaries and cattle rights. She hadn't seen him since. His name rose sluggishly through her fogged mind. Cole Maddox. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Out. Cole's gaze darkened when he saw the ropes cutting into her wrists. Without hesitation, he drew a pocket knife from his belt. She tried to warn him that her in-laws might return, that they'd make trouble, but her voice still wouldn't come. He didn't wait for permission. The blade sliced through the restraints, and her arms slumped forward with relief so sudden she nearly collapsed. Cole caught her before she hit the ground, his hands steady and warm. "Who did this?" he asked, voice tightly controlled. She shook her head weakly, trying not to betray panic, but the truth hung between them in the cold summer air. He knew, of course he knew. He'd had his share of clashes with her husband's family back when he lived here. Cruelty was not new to them, but he didn't waste time on outrage. He lifted her gently and set her on the horse, swinging up behind her so he could keep her steady. She tried to twist, tried to tell him to leave before things got worse. But then he murmured near her ear, not unkindly but with a firm finality that made her breath catch, "You're not staying another minute on that land. You come with me." The words jolted her more than the rough gallop that followed as he urged the horse toward the ridge, leaving the corral and the spite-filled ranch house shrinking behind them. She didn't know if she should cling to him or push him away, didn't know what consequences awaited him for interfering, didn't know whether this was rescue or recklessness. But as the wind whipped her hair, free and the numbness in her limbs faded into pins and needles, she felt something she hadn't in so long it felt foreign, hope. It was fragile and trembling, but real enough that she held her breath, afraid any sound would break it. The plains stretched wide around them, snow-dusted hills rolling beneath the vast sky, and she didn't dare look back. They reached the outskirts of Cole's old ranch, overgrown now, but still standing, with its fences half repaired and its barn doors swaying slightly in the cool breeze. He helped her down carefully, his hands patient as if he knew she needed to move, on her own even when her legs felt like they no longer understood how to hold her. Inside the old ranch house, he guided her to a chair by the hearth, lighting a fire that crackled with sweet-scented pine. He gave her water, letting her sip slowly, then retrieved an old plaid blanket from a cedar chest. "I shouldn't have left this place," he muttered half to himself, rubbing a hand through his hair as he stoked the flames. "I heard rumors about how they treat you. I didn't think they'd go this far." His voice was low, tight with anger he tried to restrain, and she found herself watching him with a mixture of gratitude and caution. She wanted to speak, to explain everything, but the words kept catching in her throat. Instead, she managed a hoarse whisper. "They'll come looking." He paused and met her eyes with a steadiness that made her own chest tighten. "Let them," he said simply, as though nothing in the world could shake him. But she knew they would come. Her in-laws didn't tolerate defiance, and Cole's return to the valley was bound to stir trouble. She trembled again, this time from fear rather than cold, and Cole noticed. He crouched in front of her, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. "You're safe here. No one ties a woman to a fence on my land. No one." She believed him, but fear had a tenacious grip. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe, letting the warmth of the fire seep into her bones. When she opened them again, Cole was sitting across from her, watching with a mixture of worry and something softer, something almost protective. She didn't know how long she sat there, letting the numbness fade. But eventually she found her voice enough to speak. "Why did you come back?" she asked. He hesitated. "Because I heard you needed someone on your side," he said quietly. "And because no one else around here has the spine to stand up to. Them." His jaw tightened, and she wondered what old grudges still simmered between him and her, husband's family. But he didn't elaborate. Instead, he glanced toward the window, where sunlight glinted off the snowy dust outside. "They won't show up today," he added. "Not after they left you tied out there. They think you'll still be waiting." Shiver ran through her at the memory of the ropes, but here in the warm glow of the ranch house the fear felt slightly more bearable, and for the first time in years, she felt a small spark inside her, something like strength stirring, where before there had only been resignation. As the fire popped softly and the planes whined side against the windows, she realized that whether her in-laws came storming tomorrow or not, something had shifted in her world the moment Cole cut those ropes. She was no longer entirely alone. The night fell quickly on the high plains, violet and silver across the patches of old snow, and Elena lay awake on the cot. Cole insisted she take while he slept on the floor near the door, just in case anyone tried to break in. The quiet felt sharper after years of living in a house full of slamming doors, muttered insults, and heavy boots pacing the hall that always made her flinch. Here the silence held its own kind of weight, but not the frightening kind, more like the hush between two breaths when something is about to change. She stared at the ceiling and wondered if she deserved rescue, wondered if she was burdening a man who hadn't owed her anything for years. And yet his voice earlier still echoed through her. "You come with me," and she wasn't sure whether it frightened her, relieved her, or both. When dawn edged pale gold through the curtains, Cole was already awake, brewing coffee over the old stove. He glanced over at her with a nod that passed as a good morning, though neither of them had slept much. "You'll need food," he said, sliding a plate toward her once she sat up. "And rest. You're safe, Elena. But we have choices to make." That last part chilled her more than the wind outside. Choices. She had so few for so long that the word felt almost foreign. Cole ate quietly across from her, gaze drifting off into the windows as if expecting movement on the horizon. He didn't pretend the threat wasn't real, but he also didn't show fear, and that steadiness gave her enough courage to speak. "If they come, they'll try to drag me back," she whispered. He met her eyes firmly. "Not through me." She wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't know what her in-laws were capable of, but something in his expression stopped her. It wasn't arrogance. It was resolve, deep and unshakable. The morning passed slowly. Cole worked outside repairing the old barn door while Elena tried to help but was still too weak to do more than hand him nails and tools. He didn't comment, didn't make her feel useless, just thanked her with a soft nod whenever she passed something to him. She found herself watching him work, the confidence in the way he moved, the calm concentration in his expression. He had always been like that. She remembered faintly, steady, quiet, a man who kept his word without needing to raise his voice. But she had been too young, too new to the valley's politics, to understand why her in-laws had despised him so intensely. She understood now. Men like Cole threatened men who built their power on fear. The sense of impending storm grew thick by midday. Elena felt it before she saw any sign, an old instinct honed by years of living under people who struck not with fists but with sudden consequences. She was gathering kindling near the barn when Cole stepped out, wiping his hands on a cloth, and caught the unease in her posture. "They close?" he asked quietly. She swallowed hard and nodded, though she wasn't sure how she knew. Maybe it was the stillness of the wind or the way the birds had gone quiet. Cole scanned the ridge, jaw tightening. "Get inside," he said gently. "I'll handle them." She froze. "Cole." He looked at her then, not impatiently, not dismissively, but with a soft intensity that pinned her in place. "No more fences," he said. "No more being left out to the crows. You're not going back." The sound of engine rumble in the distance cut through whatever reply she might have made. Dust plumed on the far side of the field. A truck, then a second. Cole nodded toward the house again. She obeyed this time, heart hammering, watching from behind the curtain as the two trucks approached the ranch yard. Her mother-in-law stepped out first, face pinched in a tight, fake politeness that had always preceded cruelty. Her father-in-law followed, red-faced and self-important, already barking accusations at Cole before his boots even hit the dirt. She couldn't hear the words, but she didn't need to. They were shouting that Cole had trespassed, that he had kidnapped her, that she belonged to their household. Cole stood unmoving, arms crossed, head slightly bowed as if letting them exhaust themselves before bothering to speak. When he finally lifted his gaze, Elena recognized the steel in it, the look of a man who had weathered a lifetime of storms and no longer bent to them. He said something that made her father-in-law go redder, his voice rising. Her mother-in-law pointed toward the house as if demanding Elena be handed over. Cole shook his head once. A single deliberate refusal. The shouting grew louder. Elena stepped back from the window, trembling. She felt torn, guilt, fear, the old instinct to obey, warring with the fragile sense of freedom blooming inside her. Would Cole be hurt because of her? Would they burn his ranch? Drag him into court on some made-up charge? She pressed her hands to her mouth, fighting panic. The door creaked behind her. She turned sharply, and Cole stepped in, shutting it firmly behind him. "They're leaving," he said. She gaped, breath caught. "Just like that?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "No, they'll be back. With someone they think will intimidate me. Sheriff, maybe." Her stomach dropped. The sheriff was an old friend of her father-in-law's. "Then what do we do?" Her voice cracked. Cole crossed the room, speaking softly. "We do the one thing they can't fight." She frowned. "What?" "The truth," he said simply. "We let you tell what happened. Not to them. To someone who will actually listen." She stared at him, overwhelmed. He knelt a little, meeting her gaze levelly. "Elena, you don't owe those people your life. You don't owe them silence. You're not their property." She blinked rapidly, breath shaking. "But if I leave, everything changes." "Everything needs to," he replied. The afternoon waned. The trucks did not return yet, but the threat lingered like a wolf beyond the pasture. Cole prepared supplies, saddling the horse again. "We go tonight," he said. "Before they get brave." She hesitated only a moment before nodding. When darkness fell, cool and sharp, they rode out across the plains, her sitting behind him again, but this time with hands that held tighter, not out of fear but determination. The stars glimmered over the snowy summer hills, lighting their path toward town, toward truth, toward whatever came next. Elena didn't know what tomorrow would bring, confrontation, consequences, maybe danger, but she knew one thing with unwavering clarity. She would never again stand tied to a fence waiting for someone else to decide her worth. And as Cole guided the horse forward, steady and unyielding, she let the wind carry the last remnants of her old life away into the quiet night.